What I'm about to tell you is a true story. My cousin Nate has been in the Coast Guard for over a decade. He's not the type to lie or exaggerate. He's practical, grounded, and completely non-superstitious. But what happened to him in 2017 changed him forever. This is his story. In 2017, Nate was assigned to a 2-week maintenance rotation at a remote lighthouse off the coast of Maine. The place was called Matinus Rock, and it's as isolated as it gets. Picture this: a jagged, rocky island in the middle of the ocean. One lighthouse, one auxiliary building for fuel and equipment. No power grid, no plumbing, barely any cell signal. You can only reach it by boat or helicopter. The lighthouse is automated, but it still needs manual upkeep every year. Usually it's a solo assignment. But after strange electrical failures the year before, the Coast Guard decided to send 2 people this time. Nate and another guy named Russell. The first few days were exactly what you'd expect. Windy, boring, repetitive. During the day, they'd check the beacon mechanics, test emergency batteries, refill the diesel generator, and scrape off layers of salt corrosion from the metal interior. At night, they'd read, eat simple meals, and play cards to kill time. It was isolation, sure, but it was expected. Nothing unusual, no red flags. Until the 4th night, Nate woke up around 2 a.m. feeling off. Not sick, not in pain, just like something was wrong with the atmosphere. The air felt heavy, like standing in a room right before a thunderstorm. Except the sky outside was clear and silent. He sat up in the darkness and noticed something immediately. The beacon wasn't rotating. For a lighthouse keeper, this is a huge deal. The light is supposed to sweep across the ocean every few seconds, even during maintenance. If it fails, ships are in danger. Nate shook Russell awake, and together they climbed the narrow spiral staircase to the top of the tower. When they reached the beacon room, they found the gears still moving, but the light itself wasn't turning. Something was jammed in the mechanism. It was a large, dark piece of cloth, like a blanket or an old coat, wedged deep into the gear assembly. The thing was soaked, covered in slimy moss, and it reeked of rotting seaweed and mildew. They were both confused. The door had been locked. The windows were sealed. No wind could have blown it in. No birds. It didn't make sense. They removed the fabric, tossed it out into the wind, and went back to bed, thinking it was just some bizarre one-off incident. But it wasn't. It happens again. The next night, the exact same thing happened. Around 2 a.m., Nate woke up. The beacon had stopped again. They went upstairs and found another piece of cloth jammed into the same mechanism. But this time, it was different. It was smaller. It looked like an old-fashioned scarf or shawl. Red, frayed at the edges, soaked through with what looked like ocean water. And here's the disturbing part. It had tiny crustaceans clinging to it, like it had just been pulled from the sea. Nate said that was the moment things stopped feeling coincidental. They checked the doors, the windows, the supply closet. Everything was secure. Nothing had been disturbed. Now they were starting to wonder, was someone messing with them? Or worse, had something gotten into the lighthouse and was deliberately trying to sabotage the light? From that night on, they began taking precautions. After their final check upstairs, they locked the beacon room and blocked the stairwell with heavy crates. But it didn't matter. Russell changes. On the 7th night, something happened that Nate still refuses to explain. He was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when he heard Russell whispering from across the room. But Russell wasn't talking to Nate. He was murmuring to the corner of the room, saying strange, disconnected things, like someone was standing there. Nate leaned up and asked what he was saying. Russell blinked slowly, looking confused. He told Nate he wasn't saying anything. But later that night, Nate woke again and found Russell sitting at the window, staring down at the rocks below. When he asked what he was doing, Russell said he thought he saw someone standing down there on the rocks the night before, barely visible in the edge of the beacon light. He said it looked like someone was watching them, and then it disappeared when the light rotated back. After that, things started spiraling. Russell got weirder every day. He stopped sleeping, stopped talking much. He'd just stare out the window for hours. Nate would ask if he was okay, and Russell would just mutter about noises in the walls, about hearing voices from inside the stairwell. Something was happening to him. On the 9th night, they both heard it. Footsteps on the stairs. Not the usual creaking from the wind. Real footsteps. Slow, deliberate. One after the other, coming down from the beacon room above. Nate looked over and saw Russell standing at the bottom of the stairs, frozen, staring up. "Did you go up there?" Nate asked. Russell just looked at him and said, "No." "Did you?" Neither of them had moved. They stood there, listening. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. That night, they shoved a dresser in front of the bedroom door and slept with knives under their pillows. On the 11th night, they were woken up again by the beacon failing. This time, when they reached the top of the lighthouse, the beacon room door was wide open. Not just unlocked, not just cracked, completely swung open, like someone had kicked it in. The wind was howling through, and when they got inside, the beacon wasn't just stopped. It had been deliberately tampered with. The bulb had been unscrewed and placed upright in the middle of the room. This thing is industrial grade. You can't just twist it off by hand without serious effort. Nate stared at it, terrified. Russell just kept muttering that someone had done it. Then Nate felt something brush against his back, something cold. He spun around. No one was there. Russell had gone pale. He kept pointing at the wall, whispering that he saw a hand come out of the bricks. They ran back down the stairs and locked themselves in the bedroom. Nate didn't sleep at all that night. Russell started rocking back and forth in the corner, whispering to someone who wasn't there. The next morning, Nate used the emergency satellite phone and called for an early pickup. He told them there had been a serious mechanical failure. The boat showed up that afternoon. But here's the creepiest part. When the crew arrived, they asked Nate and Russell about the distress call they had made at 2:12 a.m. that morning. But Nate had never made any call. He didn't touch the phone until daylight. The deckhands said they'd received a garbled call that came through with heavy static. A voice saying something about someone being there with them. Then it cut out. Russell didn't speak the entire ride back to shore. He quit the Coast Guard a few months later and never told anyone what really happened out there. As for Nate, he still does maintenance duty sometimes, but he says he'll never, ever go back to Matinus Rock. So what happened at that lighthouse? Was it paranormal? A psychological breakdown from isolation? Or was there really something on that island with them? Nate doesn't know. And honestly, he doesn't want to find out. All he knows is that whatever was out there on Matinus Rock didn't want them there. And it made sure they'd never forget it. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments. Would you ever accept a solo assignment to a remote lighthouse? Thanks for watching, and remember, some places are remote for a reason.